didn't really give it much thought, but one story that definitely comes to mind is sort of, you know, that classic shift where you end up doing more than you ever anticipated for the day. And this was probably what would have been late June, early July, Lost Conscious Fire 2011 in New Mexico, which at the time I believe was the largest fire in New Mexico history. Could still be, although maybe the white water quality surpassed that. In any case, the day started out, we were just going to be doing a little bit of securing and patrolling, a little bit of mop up on some ground that we had burned the previous day. We were kind of, big picture, hard to say exactly where we are, just because that is sort of escaping me, but we basically had established this long flank, and we had actually been a part of one of the initial IA resources to the fire. Anyhow, we kind of established a pretty good flank, still some heat interior, we had good winds, and so yeah, mainly securing, mopping up. We also had two folks that were doing a study for the Forest Service, sort of like a particulate study, smoke and particulate study. So we were wearing these, some of the folks on the crew had these meters that were gauging, how much dust and smoke we were exposed to. And what ended up happening was that they decided that we were a larger priority for us was on another division. So we drive for 30-40 minutes onto this ridge top. We're going to do prep work. We're going to hold the road. So everybody unloads, auger in for about an hour and a half worth of prep work, creating a fuel break along the road. And you were hearing this chatter kind of lower down in the division that we had left about wind shift and maybe a pinch point down there. And sure enough, we end up stopping what we're doing to assist another crew as part of their burn operation, but maybe just sort of take a leap on them and try to create a little bit of buffer in front of this drainage to keep it from running up the hill where we had just been working. So back in the trucks, drive back down the hill, basically get out, get into an ignition pattern, put a little bit of fire in the ground, and within minutes it's just clear that we're not going to be able to hold what we've got. And by this point they're already worried about losing that flank we had created from the day before with how much things were heating up interior. Sounds like they were making some pretty sustained crown runs, and they were concerned about spotting way back closer to our anchor point. So at this point, very well developed column, lots of smoke, lots of debris kind of falling from the sky, and again we're loaded back up in the trucks and going to ground that we didn't necessarily walk away from thinking that was all good, but it was such a large incident with so few resources that we were just trying to stay ahead of it. In any case, back closer to our original anchor point. And as we're driving there, I remember I was at the wheel at this time, and you got the squad in the back behind us, and the sun was sort of just kind of obscured from the giant smoke column, and just starting to see things like baseball-sized cards of ash just sort of like raining down all around us. And I remember there was this classic like the Andy Kaufman theme song. I think REM did it, and it was like Man on the Moon, and that was playing on the radio as we were kind of driving to where we were ultimately going to jump out of the trucks and start burning out along this road that hadn't been burned previously, to try to recreate another good buffer between us and the main fire. And we were able to do that, started ignitions, really just one lighter working off the road. Everything was pulling in because that column was just sucking everything into it. But building and building and building, you could just, the energy was palpable. We probably had, 250 fire personnel kind of lined out behind us with an array of engines and heavy big water tender with a cannon on the front. And we were feeling pretty good about where we were at, primarily in the grass timber more interior. Anyhow, getting further and further and further and further up the road, our superintendent was trying to bring fire back to us to basically burn off this road that we had left as a backup plan. We basically get to the point where the main fire is going to be able to make a solid push to the road a little bit out in front of us. We're not going to be able to make it there in time, and at that point really our fire that we're going to be able to put down isn't going to be very effective at holding the road. And you start all of a sudden getting these sort of outflow winds as that column was sort of losing its head of steam and starting to collapse, and giant outflow winds. We were in a good spot. We had really solid black, right? That we had just lit. It was cooling down readily enough for us to be able to get right into it. Not a big deal. But if we were to continue to advance and get into that timber stringer, there just wasn't really a whole lot of options for us. So we ran it as far as we could, pushed everybody back to the black as the main fire was making the sustained run. We started getting spots across the road. And I remember, sort of through the chaos of this all, there was a couple of different resources attached to us while we were holding the burn operation, and this one crew didn't have the same communication as we did, and nor the same experience, and I just remember this look in their eye of this nervous energy of wanting to do something, and feeling all this power at play, and knowing that we knew that we needed to be in the black, and they were they weren't getting the same information that we were, and they were just coiled like springs. And there was a spot across the road in the grass, and it was like, they got catapulted off the road. They all just launched off the road, tools over their heads, running to this spot. We were able to get our crew boss trainee to communicate with division. Division was able to communicate to them, and they were able to kind of round everybody up and get out of there. Ultimately, what ended up happening is, we all got in the black. Air tanker showed to start flanking off this road and end up going direct well into the night. And ultimately ended up getting some support from dozers and kind of tying it off sometime around 2:30 in the morning, basically protecting and establishing a new anchor and flank to continue to progressing, tying it back into some work that had been done out ahead. And it just turned into one of those shifts where you did a little bit of everything. You did some mop-up, you did some prep work. You thought you were going to be in this division working on the road all day, but you end up doing prep work on top of the ridge, to come back down, to do this burn, to then do this other burn show, which led to chasing spots and basically rerouting the whole flank of this fire. And I just remember feeling that true sense of relief of getting back to the buggy, getting all the guys in the back of the truck, and making your way home. And I remember thinking that night, as I laid down in the sleeping spot that I had had days before on the fire, that was in a sense what home had become distilled to, this little 3 by 8 foot chunk of ground, for all intents and purposes, was my bed and was my home. And it was just one of those good shifts to, like I said, kind of hit on all those different tactics. Through the chaos of it all, we had the 2 people that were attached to us doing the smoke monitoring. There was lots of comic relief with some of the guys. They were asking the questions, is this like a typical shift, or is this not? And they were very candid, but kind of a lot of head scratching, well, what are you really asking, which provided a lot of kind of comic relief. I remember at one point, as we were getting ready, all the tankers were making their runs, one of the guys talking about how he was gonna buy a home, settle down, and in the moment of all of that, that's where his head was at. So anyhow, in a nutshell, that was a story. We kind of refer to that one as the Braveheart story, because the way the guys leapt off the road to go chase spots. But yeah.